One quick note before we get into my conversation with Adam. This was bound to happen sooner or later, but unfortunately my microphone got unplugged in the recording process, and so all of my audio came through my webcam. Adam's audio is still great though, so please enjoy this conversation, and my apologies for the minor audio inconvenience here. Welcome to Recross the Paths, where we celebrate the Cube community one conversation at a time. My name is Cade. Today, I get to have a conversation with Adam. Adam, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
It's always a treat to get to sit down and talk Cube, and we have already pre-show maybe talked about a lot of Cube.
Yeah, I think we've talked maybe like an hour of Cube before we're going to talk about Cube for an hour.
But that's the fun stuff. Getting warmed up for that. So, Adam, you are a Cube designer, you're a writer, you do all sorts of fun stuff. So this is kind of fun to engage with you as somebody who has also interviewed other people or talked to other people for, is it fair to say, like, for your work?
Yeah. As one of my, I'd say, part-time jobs that I get to do. I've had the luxury of also interviewing folks in the Cube community.
Well, no, you've done some really nice work connecting with a bunch of people in the Cube community in a similar way, but to do it in the form of an article, like I think a lot of people engage with that media differently. You know, something you can pick up and put down at different times. You don't have to commit to however long in the car listening to that. It's a different format.
It is, yeah. I think it appeals to different people in different ways. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure getting to write about Cube and getting to explore the community a bit more, learning about the people who are running events, who are developing interesting cubes and helping grow this community that so many people are big fans of.
So how did you find your way into Cube? And I guess in the spirit of the show, to ask, Adam, why Cube?
Yes, why Cube? Because Cube is love, Cube is life. I think it's the easiest way to say it.
Cube is like Shrek, as the meme says.
Yeah, exactly. It's that onion. It has layers. Cube started for me in, I want to say 2014 is when I first got connected with it. I went through the whole cycle of trying different portions of Magic, kitchen table, standard, trying modern out, things like that, and found that I really just loved limited. It's my favorite way to play. And then I learned that that was expensive and you had to buy booster packs and go play with strangers all the time. And then my friends introduced me to the concept of building a cube. And they're like, oh, you just get to draft over and over and over again. And I realized it just kind of connected dots for everything I enjoyed. It took all the aspects from Commander that I enjoyed of like the deck building. And then I got to build 30 decks all at once and then watch people play them. And I went, wow, this is so much better. My first cube I played, I would love to note, to just razzle my friend Matilda, put together a cube that was just every card on the reserve list. And it was awful. Just proxies. Black and white proxies, no card backing, and sleeves that did not shuffle. They were like the cheapest sleeves you could buy. It was one of the worst experiences. Every game went to time. It was like a 6-hour ordeal, and it was very esoteric. Most of the people in our play group were new to Magic at the time, so it was very, very rough for them. And despite that, I was like, yes, this is what I love, and I'm coming back to this.
That's so good. Like, what a great success story, too. Like, I've brought you all here to experience what is functionally an art project. Yes. And you're still like, yeah, I'm in. Like, let's do it again.
This is so good, yeah. They're like, well, if they're on the reserve list, they have to be good. And I'm like, yeah, some of them were good. Some of them weren't.
That's pretty amazing. So, from your very first experience with the playables and unplayables there, did you immediately jump into wanting to build yourself?
Yeah, because I, for better or for worse, saw the strengths and weaknesses of that particular cube and said, wow, this is really fun. I am curious to see what I could do with it. I'm really fortunate that I've had access to a really consistent friend group and play group for several years. So the first cube that I built is named after that play group. It's the Super Magic Fun Times. And it is just I think it started on, it was like our Facebook DMs that we had at the time. That's just what we called our chat group. And we're like, hey, you want to get together for Super Magic Fun Times tonight? And so the name just kind of stuck around as I built my first cube. And it really was the archetypal thing that I tell most people to do when they're getting into Cube is just go to your collection of cards that you have, take out 360 ones that you like, and then just go draft it with your friends and see what works and what doesn't work. My takeaways from that, I remember that archetype of imagination was absolutely cracked. You cast one rampant growth, get to it a turn early, and it was just unbeatable at the time. And the cube has come a long way since then.
That's still a standing adage we hold to, is that flying is the most powerful keyword in Magic.
Oh, yeah.
And particularly powerful when your opponent can't have it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is so interesting too, because like with that cube, I made a really intentional choice to, if I included a card that was part of a cycle, I put in every card from that cycle. And then it also taught me a great design lesson that cards are not all built the same.
That is very true. And what a fun way to learn that too, because like, one person has the archetype of aggression and just getting crushed in the sky. So then coming from Super Magic Fun Times, which is still operational, of course.
It is, yeah. It's showing up at Saltbox, which I'm really excited to bring it out to the public.
Excellent. But you also have a variety of cubes that you currently curate, right?
Yeah, I have 4 that I curate. Super Magic Fun Times, I would describe it as like Legacy minus now. The idea behind it is going back to like my story with Magic, is that as I started writing more, finding opportunities to get paid in store credit for certain jobs, things like that, I was really aggressively trading away my collection to just consolidate it into the few cards I really wanted. And so the cube grew in power over time to a really fleshed out legacy cube, and then grew a little bit beyond that into something that was legacy plus. Eventually, I acquired like my first piece of power, and it really started pushing the boundaries of the type of Magic I enjoyed. So Super Magic Fun Times is now does something that I would describe as reverse power creep, where when new powerful cards get printed, I throw them into the cube, and then when I find out that they're too powerful for the environment that I want, I take them out and then move them into a vintage sideboard that can be shoved back in. So it's kind of like the Hall of Fame, like, hey, this card was awesome, but it won too much, so now we're going to put it over here.
That's a cool idea. This is like a break glass in case of obscene desire to play with powerful cards.
Yeah, it's also a helpful thing too if we have the random night where we need to support more than 8 people. Someone else shows up, we can say, okay, cool, I can just grab a handful of these ones. We'll have a slightly more juiced version of the cube.
That's a cool fix.
So there's that project. There is the one that we talked about for about 20 minutes called Everything Everywhere, which is my rules alteration one. It's a little bit more silly, but the basic idea is that you play every card you draft, and there's no lands in it, so technically a desert cube.
Technically sure.
A desert cube. And you can play every card face down as an everywhere land. I love doing that cube occasionally because it recontextualizes a lot of cards. You get to play a lot of really old, weird, bad cards. It makes things that used to be downside, like returning lands to your hand, an upside. It's a lot of fun. The last 2 I have are Jolly Cooperation, which is my 2-headed giant cube. 2-headed giant's one of my favorite ways to play Magic. And this is one of the ones I probably touched the least because I had a really clear concept of trying to make a very tight gameplay around 2-headed giant, not have too many really salt-inducing cards that just, oops, my team wins. So that's more of a like Battle Bond plus type environment. The cards that were good in Battle Bond are good here. A few other cards show up that happen to be extra good in 2-headed giant. It's really just for special occasions. And then the last cube bargain bin, which I think we're going to talk about right now.
Absolutely. One thing I do want to highlight before that, though, is just to note, I think in a cool way that you've managed to find these different lanes for your cubes, that they're each occupying a different purpose, if that's a fair way to say that, for your play group, a different way to engage with the game. So it's not all just different flavors of the same thing, just different avenues for experience.
Yeah, and that's been really, really fun. I think the longer I've been designing, the more I really come to appreciate of trying to have a concise vision for what you're attempting to do. Like Super Magic Fun Times for me was just my favorite cards, and that was a fine vision for me. And if I just had 7 friends who wanted to do that, then awesome. And now as I expand to larger groups and other people really trying to consolidate, hey, this is the concept and the vision, and it helps on all aspects from gameplay choices to cards that are going into the cube, cards that need to come out of the cube. They all become a lot easier when you make those determinations.
That's great. Well, as you suggested, perhaps right now, we should talk about the bargain bin.
Yeah.
So, Adam, give us the elevator pitch. Welcome us into the bargain bin.
Sure. The bargain bin is a cube where every card is worth less than 50 cents, and there are 2 copies of every non-creature spell. That's my very tight elevator pitch.
That's good. Well, and you were just talking about having a clear, simple goal there.
Yes.
So, from the top, why 50 cents?
Yeah, great question. I will say, on the topic of having like clean design philosophies, the original version of this cube was the opposite of that, in fact, and is a great lesson in making something simple is often making something good. And the best part of writing is editing and all of that. The original version of the cube was a pandemic project where I had nothing but time on my hands and I was completely lost in the sauce. It was called the 550 Cube.
Okay.
And it was only made of cards that at some point in their life cycle had to be worth less than 50 cents and could not currently be more than $5.
Interesting.
And there were 550 of them in the cube. And if that sounds overly complicated, Kate, I have a warning for you. It really was.
I was going to say, like, I'm imagining just the spread of graphs and charts and how frequently you'd have to, like, check pricing to make that, that make sense.
I had to go into MTG stocks constantly as I was building this and, like, look up historic pricing data to be like, was this card ever worth 20 cents? And I'll tell you, it really was not worth doing any of that. But the end result of doing that is I found out that my favorite cards were the ones that were on the lower price point. And as I was trying to explain this cube to people, because it really was just the Super Magic Funtime cube had gotten too expensive for me to want to like travel with it all the time. So I was like, I want just a cube I can throw in a backpack. If it gets beer spilled on it, I don't really care. So I'll just put the cheap cards in there. And it was a very complex way of doing it. And so I started just lowering that threshold to be like, what if it was just $2 cards? What if it was just dollar cards? What if it was 50-cent cards? And I found that I wasn't really losing much by trimming it down to that. I think, in fact, as I look at it today, the average card price in the cube is 20 cents.
Wow.
So it really shows, because there are some super powerful cards and interactions in this cube. And these aren't even the most powerful cards. And we can get into that distinction later. But yeah, 50 cents, it's a clean number. It's tangible. If you can look at 2 quarters in your hand and then look at a goblin guide in your other hand and be like, okay, this is making sense to me.
Well, most people that compare Goblin Guide to a quarter get very sad immediately knowing how much they spent on the Goblin Guide the first time.
Yes. There is an ongoing joke with this cube that I will retire it the day that Tarmogoyf goes into the cube. I will be really sad about that.
Yeah, not to dig too much into the secondary market, but that day may be coming, Adam.
I know, coming real soon. Yeah, waiting for it.
It's a token now. Did you hear that?
I did, yes, because it's a token made from Tarmogoyf Nest, and I played in my friend's cube that has Tarmogoyf Nest, and his tokens are just actual Tarmogoyfs, and it breaks my heart every time it happens.
That's so good. Well, I mean, I think that is the next logical question here. How do you choose the cards that fit in that parameter? Because that does encompass a huge swath of the game.
Yeah, an incredibly large number of cards. There's a couple things that go into it. From a starting point, like most cubes should be, it's cards that I like. But beyond that, there are a few specifics that I really try and dig into. One, when I was designing this cube, I found out quickly that I wanted to try and make something that was, one, beginner friendly. Super Magic Funtimes has become less beginner friendly the more powerful it's gotten. And I really take pleasure in introducing new players to Magic. It's something I do a lot of. And so having a cube that is an easier draft format is really, really important. So cards kind of have to fit into that, not overly complex, a little easier to grasp. The second one is understanding the power level of the cards, as I wanted the power to be relatively flat comparatively. I think if you were to take a look at some of the cards that are worth 50 cents, the one that I point out most often is I'm a huge fan of the original Titan cycle with Inferno Titan, Engraved Titan, and Primeval, and all of them.
Delicious.
Inferno Titan is 30 cents now, which breaks my heart to hear because it is like a card that I am so fond of and think about as being like a card that I like sought after when I was growing my first Legacy Cube. But it's a card that just does not belong in here. It is too efficient. It is too strong. It is too good. Like Flame Tongue Kavu makes this list, and even that is sometimes a little bit pushed depending on what deck it's in. But when I'm evaluating new cards to go into the cube, I really want to make sure that they are not just some weird commander card that happens to be a reprint from some other set and costs next to nothing but is totally busted. Probably the best example of this is Hymn to Turok, which is a card that I love and hate. Love casting it, and then I hate the way it makes people feel. But like that's a card that realistically fits into this criteria, but should not be in this type of list.
So is it like a comparison sort of thing where you'd say against a card like Flame Tongue Kavu, or is it like more abstract and just having a sense of kind of where you want things to play?
It's a bit more abstract. I'm really fortunate to have an active play group of people. And with this list in particular, because it is so easy to grasp, I am really, really open to asking for feedback on it and saying, hey, like, what do you want to see? What worked? What didn't work? One of the main advantages of having a list that is built around a budget is you can ideate and you can change it pretty rapidly and very inexpensively. The last update I did to this cube was after a draft we did 2 weeks ago, and a lot of feedback on that. And I think I changed 80 cards, and I think it cost me $11 to swap those cards out.
That's so good. It's like the greatest cost is shipping, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just have to make sure you hit the free shipping level, and then you're good. So just add a few other cards in there, a few Tarmogoyfs for future.
Good.
But I think that really plays a big role in what I'm choosing to put in here and how quickly these cards move around.
Have you bumped up against the budget restriction often with cards that you've wanted to include?
All the time. It breaks my heart. And I think one of the challenges I have with this is how stringent I am with the budget, because depending on who you're buying cards from, prices can vary. 50 cents also felt like a very safe number to use because it tends to be the kind of bottom rate that a like local game store will charge for their bin rares, to be like, yeah, these are 50 cents. So it's like something that's really easily accessible. But yes, I have bumped up against that threshold a bunch. And it is actually wild to look back and think about some of the cards that have been in this list and then look at what their pricing is now. Like Ephemerate was in this list for a really long time. I think it's floating around like $5 now, and as it should be. It's a really messed up card.
Turns out, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the one that sticks out to me the most is one of my favorite cards of all time is Eternal Witness. I love the card. It feels very clean to me. It's really easy to grasp. It's powerful. It does great stuff. And also, I think it's like floating in the $4 or $5 range right now.
And you used to have Ephemerate in here, so...
Yeah, I know. I don't know why that was a problem. But fortunately, Wizards has been nice enough to print variations on the card. So that priced out of the cube. And then I went to Evolution Witness. And I was like, oh, this is kind of similar. At that time, I had a really small counter strategy. So I was like, oh, there's some cool cross play that can go on here. And then that priced up to like $2 for, I don't know why. And
they keep printing spells that reference counters.
Yeah, it's weird how they keep doing that. Eventually that transitioned into Timeless Witness. And then I had that in here for a while and I enjoyed it because there was a green-black, cared about the graveyard deck so you could mill it over, get it back later. Newer players were having some trouble with Eternalize and comprehending that. And so in this last update where I was switching things around, putting more counters back in here, I will give a shout out to a really good friend of mine, Ford, who helped do a lot of these most recent updates after our draft, was like, hey, why don't you put Evolution Witness in your list? I was like, oh, I'd love to, but it's like $1. It's like, no, I just checked it. It's 30 cents again. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. It's back in.
Celebrations, and you've made it.
Yeah.
Yeah, help clarify that a little bit. So when you're evaluating price, is that the price at which you can acquire it, or is there a metric that you have to like priced at this in this way?
I went back and forth on how stringent to be about this for a while, and I'd say as time has gone on, I've gotten a little bit more loosey goosey.
Adam, I have to say, I wish I could bottle that angst of just like, I don't know how I define this.
Yeah. And the way I do it now is it's just vibes, as the kids would say. But
The kids do say that a lot.
the kids do say that. They also say 6'7", and I don't know what that means, but I'm too scared to admit it. But
I may have to censor that. I don't know what that means.
And yeah, that might be something crass. I don't want to make this a blue episode for you. But I think I have kind of taken a holistic approach to it, which is if things could reasonably be acquired for that much, that is kind of the framework that I put on it. I have some cards in here. There are 3 in particular that are not 50 cents, and they are part of the Painland cycle. It's, I think, Caves of Koilos, Sulphurous Springs, and Underground River.
Yep.
Every other one of those is less than 50 cents. All of those, the cheapest one's $2. So I just have a really damaged version in this cube, and I'm like, close enough.
That's great. Yeah. Letter of the law? Nah. Spirit of the law? Yes.
It's totally fine. Which actually is funny because I had to go through a process of finding the correct damaged version to put in the cube because the cube is played unsleeved.
Okay.
That's another part of it is, hey, these are cards that I want you to experience touching cardboard, playing with them. I require people at like riffle shuffle and like really get into it because I'm like, at the end of the day, if you bend one of my cards in half, you give me 50 cents and we'll call it good. Honestly, give me 25 cents and I probably owe you 5 cents based on the averages of these cards.
I'm reminded of my friend Daniel, who does the data-generated vintage cube, giving us the speech beforehand of like, hey, I need you to understand these cards are valuable. We need to take care of them and all that. I love this idea of like the exact opposite of that, but with the same call of like, all right, if you damage these cards, you will be responsible.
You'll be responsible
for replacing heritage reclamation.
Yeah, I mean, in my local pro group, it was specifically Deep Cavern Bat. Someone lost the game because of Deep Cavern Bat having lifelink, and as it's a really tiny little thing on it, but they were infuriated by it. And so the game finished, and they're like, "Can you hand me that card?" And again, this is at my house, good friends. Hands the card over. He just looks at it and he just rips it in half in front of me, and then he goes into his box that he has with it, and he pulls a copy out of another deck and he hands it to me. And I'm like, "I hate this card."
That's so good.
It's like, but you don't get that experience with someone's Tundra. I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully you're not.
I mean, if you've got extra Tundras in a box, that is a flex.
Yeah.
No, that's so funny. So do you engage with a changing budget? Like, what do you do if a card changes in value?
It's turned into whenever I'm going to make an update, I'll do a price check on cards. And if things are over the 50 cent value by a considerable amount, like if it, and I'm normally just going off of Cube Cobra's ratings these days for ease of my mind.
Sure. Yeah.
But if a card says that it's 51 cents, I'm not worrying too much because it'll probably fluctuate in a few days. But if it's $1, I'll take it out of the cube. And I found the process to be really rewarding because it has turned this cube into much more of a living project than my other ones. Like I said, the last update had 80 cards changed. That's a crazy amount. So the folks who drafted a little while ago coming back to it are going to see new cards, new archetypes, new power balances between what's going on. And you don't get that same velocity with cards that have a really heavy monetary investment put into them.
Yeah, because like if you're going to buy a card that costs you a bunch of money, you really want to make sure it sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's given me the opportunity to try more cards. Again, shout out to my friend Ford, just because he and I have been going back and forth after our last draft with more suggestions. There's a bunch of cards that I put in here because he just said, hey, I'd love to see this. And I go, great. Like the risk to me is 40 cents. And then if it doesn't work, I just put in another card. And that's such a cool place to be from a design perspective, to just be able to churn through cards, try things out, and get really surprised by cards that like I would never play, but someone else is really high on, or someone played a limited environment where they remember it being really good, but it never made it into a constructed deck, so it's only 10 cents. It's such an open opportunity.
And you get to like celebrate what your friend's excited about too.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you engage with new cards from new sets? Is that something you have like wait for things to settle before you consider them, or do you jump on in spoiler season?
It's really tough. I'd say I try not to think about cards for this cube in particular until the exact moment that I need to purchase them. We're recording this like just before Secrets of Strixhaven is coming out, and the charm cycle that got
So
spun that,
sick.
I'm like, I want these in all of my cubes, and I think that several of them could be in this cube in like 3 years. But probably not right now. And so I just have to kind of put blinders on and be like, these would be great one day.
But you also have other projects that you can engage with new cards, of course.
Absolutely.
But, as somebody who, I work at a card store, right? Like one of those, the pricing for new sets is pretty wild.
Yeah, I can imagine. Actually, to that like price point, one thing that has really cracked me up is that I think the current price to buy the entire cube is like sitting around $40, $50,
That's
which
so
is
good.
a lovely place. And I'll talk about my feelings on that for a second. But the actual cube costs much more than that because it's just filled with the versions of the cards that I have. So like if I happen to have Thalia Guardian Thraben that's kind of blinged out, that's the one that's in the cube right now.
This is the Pauper problem, isn't it? Where it's like,
Yes.
This deck is very cheap, except that my counterspells are arena promos. And
Exactly.
That,
Yeah. One change I did make recently to this is I removed every foil card from the cube. Being unsleeved, I found that it was very easy to accidentally cut to those Pringle chips. And so I took them out entirely. And so that was a big overhaul. But yeah, the one thing I was going to say, pricing. One of the things that I'd say has been maybe the nicest experience I've gotten is the amount of folks who have reached out to me who have copied the list and said, hey, I want to build a cube and I don't have a lot of money. And I went on CubeCover and I searched budget cubes and yours is one of the cheapest. And I looked at it, it seems great. Like that is the nicest thing I can hear from anyone because if someone is building their first cube and they take this and it enables them to do that, that makes me so happy. I want every play group in the entire world to have a cube. And if they can get that together for two $20 bills, that's such a wonderful feeling.
Well, yeah, and what a testament to something like that it captures people. And hopefully not just for the price point, but like that this provides an interesting experience at that price point.
Yeah, I'd say it's been a good mix. I've actually had the fortunate chance to talk to a few of the people who have done this to say like, hey, like, what are you looking for? Because they don't have the same firm restrictions that I do about this. And they go, oh, I really always want to do the ninjas deck. And I go, hey, I used to have ninjas in here and it's amazing. I took it out because it's too good. But if you take it and you boost it up, the power level of this up a little bit, ninjas is great. All of the cards are really inexpensive. You should put them in here. It'll go really great with this other archetype. And I've helped them iterate and start building out their cube into something bigger. And like that is such a joyous feeling.
Yeah, and not a question so much, but just emphasizing that that's such a value to be able to start with a template if you're designing. Like, you don't have to build everything up from the ground, but to see something and go, I like where this is, and if I want to change a couple things to my own taste, great. It's like a recipe, these are the pieces I want to put into it, and I can make something different.
Exactly, yeah. So that's been honestly one of the most flattering things that I've experienced inside the Cube community.
Well, Adam, we probably ought to talk about the other major part of this. Budget is half, and then the other half is double.
Yes.
So you've doubled every non-creature spell. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, this is the part that you're going to dislike, Cade.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The reason why, and actually let me give listeners some insight to this. I was fortunate enough to interview several people, Cade being one of them, for a series of articles I wrote a few months ago now.
And several other awesome people that we need to make sure to acknowledge.
Very, very awesome people, yes. I'm going to acknowledge two of them specifically right now because I interviewed Cade and Judge Bones within the same short span. And during that, I ask the same because, again, I'm writing and I write on the internet. So there's certain criteria I need to meet. And one of those is asking for hot takes. So I asked everyone, what's your hot take on Cube? And both you and Bones had the same answer of duplicating cards. And it shook me to my core. I had to take a walk afterwards. I felt uneasy because in my mind, Cube is a singleton format. How dare you break singleton on cards? And then I lost sleep about it, and then I thought about it more, and I like reached back out, and I was like, huh, okay, there's a lot of advantages to this. So I'm actually going to turn this question on to you, Cade. In your words, what are some of the advantages of having duplicate cards?
I will also note that Bones and I didn't talk to each other about this beforehand, like, so we didn't collaborate on
Yeah.
it, so it's kind of fun to end up in that space. I think there's some value in duplicating certain cards because it reduces mental load. This is something that Parker has talked a fair bit about in some of his projects, where if you know that there's going to be more than one of something, you don't have to put as much weight on it the first pass around. You know there's more of it, and you don't have to think about the variance of it. I also think that it helps some with power level because you can get more of the same effect without having to choose a better or worse version of something. It's like, why would you have lightning bolt and chain lightning if lightning bolt is correct? Just have 2 lightning bolts. It hurts this part of your brain, right? Like, I can see the expression you're making where it's like, this
Yeah.
feels wrong. It feels like you want to do something different. But there's argument for it, at least.
For anyone sitting at home or in their car right now who's scrunching up their face saying, I would never, I was you, and I was wrong. And I'm happy to say that. I don't know that it's right for every cube, again, depending on what your concept and what your idea for the cube is, whether it's to just highlight specific cards from specific sets or recreate a limited environment. But specifically, I did this because I wanted this cube to be really approachable for newer players. I wanted someone to be able to sit down and get it right away. And it does that so well. It lightens the mental load because, in many ways, if you see a card, one, you can expect to see another one. You know, hey, I can build a strategy around this because I'm probably going to be the only one taking these cards. And then two, helps flatten that power level out tremendously. When you see lightning strike in the cube, you know, one, there's another lightning strike. You know, two, that's the rate I should be expecting burn spells. So it really does decrease that feel bad, which is, I think, something you and Bones both touched on. Of it feels really bad when all your burn spells cost 2 and 3 mana, and your opponent just happened to draft all the 1 mana burn spells. And you're like, oh, what the heck?
I think it's worth at least acknowledging that, like you said, it's not a hard and fast rule. There are going to be times that you want some of the contour of different cards doing different things.
Yeah.
My thought is just in lieu of, I just need to fill out this section, whatever section that is, and I'm just going to choose different versions of something when the same card in multiples could suffice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is like the good wisdom that listeners should take away from this. And then I took it into a crazy direction and said, every non-creature spell, double it right now.
I wish I remembered the video years ago. Somebody did a little clip where it says, everything in moderation, including moderation. So let's go.
Exactly, yeah. But it's worked out really well for the type of environment that I'm trying to support. And it has led to some other things that, like, we didn't talk about in our initial interview, but things that I have noticed by doubling all the non-creature spells that I found really fascinating.
For example?
Yeah. Oh God, Kate, you're so good at interviews. This doesn't have to make it into the episode, but I'm just going to say that as a person who does interviews, I appreciate a good interviewer who asks good questions. Anyway,
sometimes you got to go for the low-hanging fruit, like
you
yes,
gotta,
and
yeah. It's a game of volleyball. I am putting something up and you're spiking it in, and like that's how you win, and it's
That's
great,
right.
and I love it.
That's right.
But a couple of things that I've noticed as a result of this is one, players sideboard much more effectively, and it's so cool to see. Something that, like, in Cube, I find that most people will say they will struggle with is sideboarding at all, or effectively, to say the least. But in this, there are so many more opportunities to include cards and include them in higher density, like Pick Your Poison is a card that could be in your main deck and in your sideboard is situationally really strong. Having one or potentially two of them can be really incredible if it is kind of the anti-card to another matchup you might face. And I have interviewed and asked players, I'm like, hey, do you feel like you've sideboarded more or less than you do in other cubes? And everyone kind of has these like eyes open wide and they go, oh, I sideboarded every single game and that's not something I'm used to doing. And I think it is partially because of greater access to these cards and partially because of the lightened load mentally of having to look through your sideboard if there's some redundancy in there. And also, it makes cards like Disenchant easier to pick up during the draft because you know there's going to be another one, or when you get one late, you're like, this has to be in here for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not super complex, and it's wonderful.
Has that sensibility pushed you toward modal spells, things that are more versatile, or has it pushed you to things that are more narrow?
So it actually rewards both, which has been really, really cool. It has allowed more linear cards to feel better because, again, I'm only putting in a linear card if I want you to play with it, if there's a payoff for it or a reward behind it. And then it allows those cards that are more flexible to have more opportunities for corner cases to appear. A good example of this is Chocobo Racetrack. I could talk about Universes Beyond separately or beside of this, but like it's a card that when it's good in a matchup, it's really good, and when it's bad, it's pretty bad. But having a card like that, it's very linear on what it is attempting to do, what role it plays, when it shows up in the matchup. Comparing that to a card like Thraben Charm, for instance, has a variety of different things that it can do, from removing opposing enchantments to popping something out of the graveyard at instant speed or dealing damage from your token deck. Like, that is a role player that can pop in and do multiple roles for several different strategies. And it's cool having duplicates because it really does support both of those methodologies.
I know you kind of joked that like you determined to just go full speed ahead, but did anything in particular lead you to doubling all of them as opposed to just some select things to highlight particular mechanics?
Yes. It started initially when I did this. I wanted to test out the idea, and I thought about different ways of doing it. I looked at doubling up some creatures, and I think it made sense to double up specific creatures. Like ones that come to mind is don't put Elvish Mystic and Land War Elves into the same cube. Just put 2 copies of the same one. This cube does have Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves, notably. But like that is the first place where you can go with this. Say, hey, if a card is functionally the same, just put the same card in there so people do less mental work.
Now, you listener, don't do this, but I do.
Yeah, but as I say, not as I do. But as I continued to look through cards and really view creatures, I found that creatures felt so much more unique. There were so many opportunities for slight differences between them. If it's the specifics of the casting cost, the colors that go into it, the power toughness, the way their abilities work. Like, there are a lot of cards that function similarly, but are texturally different. So I really enjoyed having that space where those all felt unique in Singleton and the role players. And then when I got into the non-creature spells, these are the effects that you want to interact in the board. And specifically, this is a cube that really is creature combat focused. You're not comboing out. You're playing your cool creatures. You're doing stuff to power them up, to engage with them. So having effects that felt redundant in that space made more sense. Now, when I initially made the transition, I kept an exception for 5 cards in each monocolor. For each monocolor, there were 5 singleton non-creature spells that I thought were so cool, but they were power outliers. And so I was like, I just cannot justify doubling up on cards like this. And I did that for 2, maybe 3 drafts before just going full bore over to doubling all non-creature spells. And the reason being is that it was easier to explain. My elevator pitch was 2 sentences. It was very clear. My prior elevator pitch involved something like, every card is worth less than 50 cents. And all non-creature spells are doubled, except for 5 power outliers that are non-creature spells, but only in monocolor. In dual or 3 colors, there are also duplicates of the cards that exist that are non-creatures. Any questions?
It's like you can already feel people like lifting over the side, yeah.
Tuning out, yeah. So I was like, okay, that value that I got by playing a card that I thought was really cool was not comparable to the reward that I got for just having something really clean and easy to explain. Say, hey, these are the cards. This is what you can expect. Go have fun. Like, having a really tight elevator pitch served what this was trying to do.
You kind of mentioned it with the budget. providing, let's say, some opportunities for including some new cards, providing some challenge for what to include. Just knowing that you're going to see each of the non-creature spells twice, does that make it easier or harder to pick these out for you?
It also frustratingly goes both ways. And I can give good examples of cards where when I know there's a duplicate, it feels incredible. Ulcerate is a card that I enjoy. I think it is a cool design. It kind of plays into this. You can have your 1-mana removal spell, but it's going to hurt you a little bit. And it sends a really good signal to all of your drafters. So I'm like thrilled to have this in here because you see this in the pack and you have an expectation about what black removal is going to look like or feel like in the cube. And then on the opposite side of that, there are cards that I think are really cool and really interesting and I want to try out, but I'm concerned that they are going to be too strong. Recent examples and part of this last change was finally seeing, and actually taking a slight tangent on this, I have noticed, and it is so interesting for cube designers to play with different groups because different groups prioritize different things. Living in Baltimore and having access to a really wide range of cube drafters is such a luxury because I get to see the different things that people want to do. But just starting off with my like local core group of 15 rotating players or so, they really prioritize certain strategies. And there were dormant strategies in this cube that in my mind, I'm like, wow, these things are incredible. They're so good, but they never won because no one wanted to draft them. I recently put in Air Nomad Legacy from Avatar. It's a white and blue enchantment. When it enters, it makes a clue token, and then all your creatures with flying get +1/+1. So I think as we were talking about before, one of the strongest keywords you can have in Cube is flying. And no one was drafting blue-white flying. And I was like, man, this card feels so good. And so I was like, but it might be too strong. It replaces itself with the clue token. It does these other things. I played it with my local group for a long time. I was still concerned about the card. No one ever drafted them. They went really late, and I was confused. And then recently played with another local player who just absolutely wiped the floor with me. And it felt so vindicating, but also so eye-opening to be like, oh, hey, having duplicates of this is so problematic for this deck. They never resolved more than one against me. They never were pumping creatures by +2/+2, but that did not matter. The redundancy that had happened every single game made their interaction so strong and so powerful. But I can count numerous cards. Oni Cult Anvil is a really fun card that my one play group would not touch with a 10-yard pole, and then someone put it in their like Grixis Spellslinger Sacrifice Synergy deck and just absolutely hose someone for 10 damage in a single turn. And so yes, there is a real risk to duplicating some cards, and it also depends on the proclivities of your play group.
Yeah, I was wondering, like almost specifically with removal, because it's like that you're going to have like a card like Languish, your Wraths or some of your high octane removal. Just knowing that there's multiples of those in the cube has to change how you draft and play.
It does, yeah. It is interesting to see that as well. I'm not a big proponent of hate drafting cards, and I have seen people lean into that slightly with this, where when you're getting down to the bottom of the pack, there's not a lot left. It is a little easier to hate draft because there is so much more redundancy in those non-creature effects, the ones that could be really good sideboards. So it is interesting that players are taking those last 3 or 4 picks from packs to kind of anti-sideboard against themselves.
That's interesting. Well, Adam, we mentioned toward the top that you do some writing for Cool Stuff Inc. In that, why did you choose to focus on Cube as part of that?
Well, at the top of our interview, I mentioned that Cube is love, Cube is life, and really stuck by that. No, I love writing. Writing is something that's kind of been in my blood for a long period of time. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that any aspiring writer can get is to write about what you know, write about what you love. And Cube is a topic that I can always find something to be really excited about and really find some joy and reasons to share this happiness for this format, whether it is talking to interesting people who are in the Cube community talking about new cards, new ideas, or new ways to contextualize this game that we all love. Yeah, I love having the opportunity to write because it's just something that I really care about.
So in that pursuit, you mentioned talking with people, and you took some time to interview some folks in the community: Scott Mertzopoulos, Pleasant Kenobi, Gwen Decker, all these kind of all-stars. Why did you choose interview as the vehicle there? Because I know there's a lot of ways to get to, fill in the word count.
Yeah. I'll give you the really transparent answer. When you're writing for a company, they have certain expectations and they have certain requirements that they're looking for from you. Specifically, this project of interviewing folks was an idea that I felt really passionately about, and it is an idea that I wanted to pursue. So it is something that I had to kind of convince the people above me, like, hey, there's some value, there's some interest to this. And the reception was really strong and really positive because I think in a lot of ways these articles helped highlight the vibrance of this community, what Cube is doing. I mean, even just looking at the event scene, going back to pre-pandemic era where we had GPs, things like that, constant in-person events, those don't really exist in the same capacity. And frankly, like I was shocked when I learned that like Magic events, Magic days have a really high ticket price because I was used to just strolling into a GP for free and paying for the one side event that I wanted to do and then getting access to artists and other players and friends. That was a culture shock for me. Then going to what this community is doing, it doesn't really exist in the same capacity for other formats. And it is beautiful. It is such a cool, heartening, unique thing to see these people coming together, whether it is on Discord, whether it is people flying out to do certain events with one another. Like it is a truly wonderful thing. And it is inspiring and brings me joy. And it is something that I wanted to share with other people. And that is, again, some of the best feedback that I got from doing this is the amount of readers who would respond to be like, I didn't realize there was a New York Cube scene, which I'm like, yeah, there's a huge one. Let me introduce you to your 90 new best friends. And I love that. I love helping tear down entry to things, to make things more accessible, to help educate people, to help bring people into this community that is so vibrant and so cool. And writing is just the way that I get to do that.
And I know we could read your articles to jump to the punchline there, but what have you found most surprising about this project that you didn't expect?
Can I get on my soapbox? No,
Sure.
it's your soapbox. That's what you're supposed to say.
Probably not on the salt box. That's
I'm looking at this tiny miniature salt box that I made for the salt box event as a deck topper, and so my brain went there. Can I get on my soapbox for a second? Is what I meant to say.
Please.
The thing I found most surprising from doing these community interviews, but also stepping out of my current playgroup into the larger Baltimore scene, into the tournament scene, is I was so surprised how vulnerable people felt about their cube creations. As you write, you have to get really comfortable with criticism and feedback to become a better writer. And so you have to open yourself up to people saying, hey, this doesn't work, and not taking it personally, knowing that it's a way for you to try and improve and get better. And something that I was really shocked by from interviewing a lot of people for this project and then just talking to a lot of people as I expanded was the amount of folks who shared how nervous they were to bring their cube to an event for the first time. Say, hey, I'm worried that people are going to say awful stuff, or they're going to dislike it, or they're going to pick apart every little aspect of this. And it's going to make me feel bad because I put my heart and soul into this project. And Cade, that was heartbreaking to learn and hear. And it is something that I have thought about from the day that I first heard it to the day that you and I are talking right now. And it is something that I have actively really, really worked to help produce a counter to that. because I think it shows up for a couple of different reasons. Most of the criticism that I have seen in this community, whether it is about someone's cube, is not coming from a negative space. It's not coming from trying to beat someone down or be rude to them. Most of it is coming from a constructive, like, hey, you're doing this, but I think this could be better. And it is just delivered in a way that is not necessarily receptive to people who aren't comfortable with that criticism. And so my soapbox thing that I could talk for an entire another hour about is teaching people how to give effective criticism is such an empowering tool. And one of the things that I would tell anyone, whether it was in the cube community or any other creative industry, is that it costs you literally nothing to be encouraging. And it can mean the world to someone when they are trying something new, when they're opening themselves up or being vulnerable. And that is something that I try to reinforce so much with new players, because this was not the experience that I had in my really small 15-person group. It was all encouraging. When someone had a bad idea, we said, dude, you should go do that bad idea, and we will try it with you, and we will figure out together that it was bad, but we will support you in doing this, and we will put a smile on because we care about you and we want you to learn. And it is this idea that I really try and share to the community, is that if someone has an idea that they're excited about, I think take advice from the kink community. Try your best not to yuck someone's yum. If someone is really excited about Universes Beyond, awesome. I am happy for you. I want you to explore your Universes Beyond cube. That makes me happy for you. It might not be the thing that I really want to do, but it is something that I think we should all learn to be really supportive of one another to help encourage the community to grow. And I think at our core level, people do that. People believe that. People understand that. And it can get a little lost in translation with the idea of trying to optimize, trying to make people better, cubes better, things better. Yeah, just always try your best to be thoughtful and generous with how you're approaching criticism for someone else. Ooh, and I'll stop talking about it. Ask if the person wants criticism. That's a huge one, is that sometimes people are just giving you something, and your best response you can say was, thank you for taking the time to put this thing together for me. I appreciate that you did this. Even if you didn't like it, that's fine if they're not ready for criticism.
Yeah, that's so good to be able to be honest about it. You don't have to say, this was great. You can say, I appreciate that you brought me here for this.
Yes, I appreciate how much effort you put into this. I probably won't do it again. Do you want feedback? And they say, no, not looking for it. Go, great. I'm not going to give you feedback, but I'm also probably not going to draft it again. That's a totally acceptable thing that allows person to move through it. And then when they say, do you want the feedback? Great. There's going to be so much more receptive to working with you and making those improvements. Again, I think I've said his name 3 times now. Ford, 80 cards, new to this list, because he's like, I have a lot of feedback for you. And I'm really receptive to all that. And that's a great, wonderful place to be, because as I look at a new list, I'm like, yeah, this is exciting. And I get to bring it to new people. And there's all these new cards, and different color pairs have been entirely revitalized thanks to this feedback that I was kind of blind to, but someone else could see. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing.
That's good. Well, and things like tone are hard on the internet, where a lot of people connect.
Yes.
In person, it's a little different for sure. So, Adam, I know you've offered a lot of great thoughts in this to try to put a neat little bow on things. What advice would you want to make sure to share with other designers as they consider their own projects?
I would tell people to be intentional with what you're trying to do. Intention is one of the coolest things any person can do at any part of their life. So if you have an idea, be really clear about what that idea is. It is so much easier to receive feedback when your goal is clear, because people can help you work towards that goal. And that goal can be whatever you want. And for folks who might resonate with that, that's awesome if you're designing it for a group of people that you want to resonate with your goal. And if folks don't resonate with it, that's okay too. This can be sometimes a personal project if you're just building something that feels good to you. But try and do things with intention, whether it is cube design or how you provide feedback.
That's great. Well, Adam, this has been so fun. And as we joke about, there's always so much more we could discuss, and perhaps we will at some point. Before I let you go today, though, I do want to ask you one of my very favorite questions, which is, If you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick, and who would you have do the illustration?
I'm co-opting this question. I'm stealing this question because I loved it and it destroyed my brain all day. I don't know if this is the intention that you had for the question, so I'm going to take it in the way that my brain took it.
One of my favorite parts of this is that nobody follows the same set of rules for it, and
yeah,
it
it's
makes me
how
very
you
happy.
interpret
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Because the way I pictured it was like it is similar to a question that I've had in my brain of like, if you won like the player championship,
Oh, yeah, like
and
the
got to design your
invitational
own
cards. Yeah.
yeah, what would you do for that? And that is something that I have racked my brain on. But the answer is really, really big. And so I apologize to future editing, Kate. First of all, I'll start with the artist. The artist would be Amelia Leonards, not a magic artist. But if anyone is not familiar with them, go look up her work. It is incredible. It is like Rebecca Gay. It is watercolor, but more fantastical. It is evocative. It is beautiful. It is vibrant. It is whimsical. Every animal has antlers for some reason. They all have lanterns hanging from those antlers. Like, oh, I love it.
This is not a joke. I've pulled this up, and everybody's got antlers.
Everybody's got antlers. And you know what? That's a great vibe to have. So to answer your question, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you 5 answers, but they all go together.
Okay. Buckle up.
Going back full circle to Super Magic Fun Times, having reverse power creep as the like core concept I keep around for this one. This is the opposite of that. This is as overt power creep as possible. I would do a cycle of cards that would be power creep of popular old cards, and here are the stats for them. And they would all also be referential jokes.
Of course.
We would have Grandmother of Runes, which would be white for a 1/1, gives all your creatures protection. Just bonkers strong. Love it, but really wizened old woman in the artwork. Probably has antlers. This all started with a joke as a Baltimorean Marylander. The blue card in this cycle would be Hedron King Crab.
Of course, yes.
Blue for a 0/4 that has landfall. Make a Hedron Crab. So it just honestly goes off immediately. In black, we would have Darkest Confidant. Black for a 2/2. Reveal the top 2 cards. Do the whole same thing there. Because greatness at any cost, just, right out the door.
Greatness with inflation here.
Exactly, yeah. We would have Old Pyromancer, which is red for a 3/3 that makes 2 1/1s. And then my absolute personal favorite, in the green category, we would have Grizzled Bears, which is 1 in a green, that when it ETBs and attacks, it makes a grizzly bear.
Oh, there you go.
Bring it back. Because I still distinctly remember grizzly bear being like a threshold for a good card in my brain. And every time I see a 2/2 with upside, it hurts me a little bit. And so I'm like, you know what? If we're going to hurt me, let's go the whole way with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, those would be the cards. Grandmother of Runes, Hedron King Crab, Darkest Confidant, Old Pyromancer, and Grizzled Bears.
That's so good. Well, Adam, if folks want to follow up, if they want to connect with some of what you're doing with your writing through Cool Stuff Inc., if they want to read on some of your Cube projects, where should we point them?
Yeah, on Cube Cobra, I'm A Melfa, MELFA. On Cool Stuff Inc., Adam Melfa, if you find me there. I'm on Discord. All those are kind of linked to those various places. But reach out to me. I want to talk about Cube. Reach out to me specifically if you are making a copy of the bargain bin and want to edit it, because I love chatting with folks about that. I think I'm up to like 8 people who have done it and reached out to me, so it's been such a treat. But yeah, reach out to me. If you're ever in the area, let me know. I would love to draft with you. If you're listening to this and you're not part of the Baltimore Play Group, what are you doing? Come hang out.
You may not be in Baltimore. That may be the problem.
Yeah, that may be the problem, yeah. If you're listening to this and you're in Baltimore and you're not part of the Baltimore Play Group, but if you're not in Baltimore, just move there. It's an easy enough solution.
That's all. That's the charge of the conversation.
Just move there, yeah. We'll figure everything else out for you.
Adam, this has been a pleasure, my friend. I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to have the chat and for all you're doing to highlight more parts of the community. Thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah, Gabe, thank you for the opportunity to talk, and thank you for all that you're doing with the podcast. It is wonderful to learn more about the community. It's a great space, and I'm happy to be part of it.